we're going live then. So,
I mean, I'm happy to do like filler content for you right now.
yeah.
People to come in.
Or Mark could sing, apparently.
Oh,
Come on.
I can sing, but I'm not singing that song.
All right. It's a great song, though. It's been a while since it's been recorded, too. Howard Livingston was the last one down there who did it, so I feel like it could use a refresher.
It probably could.
For those of you who are just joining us and not paying attention to the conversation, we're talking about the KOA theme song, which Mark is apparently not going to sing for us. But Ben,
I am not going to sing.
Wiggle, sing it for us.
I only know part of it, like the Great Day at KOA part. So
Do what you know. Go ahead.
it's a great day at it's a great day at KOA.
It's got to be way more high pitched and peppy. Come on.
Well, I'm not a singer, so
First time for everything. Anyway, you got Facebook Live going? You ready to introduce people?
I'm trying. It's being a little buggy today.
It says we're live on Facebook on my end, so.
It does? Okay. All right. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to WCM Fireside Chats again. We have this week we're going to focus a little bit on Michigan. We've got quite a lineup from the state of Michigan, which is my hometown.
Michigan is your hometown?
My home in Michigan. So it's great to be talking to some people from the Mitten State.
I think you're freaking up, Ben. So
What?
there you go. We got you back. So you said Michigan is your hometown, but not your hometown.
Home state, yeah, home state. So
what's your hometown in Michigan?
we've got Darren Ing from the Michigan Association of Recreational Michigan Association of Recreation Vehicles and Campgrounds. There, I said it right. It just took me a minute. And then Mark Lemoine from the Coloma-St. Joseph Campgrounds of America. And Mark, is that a holiday or a journey?
I am a KOA holiday.
There you go. We got to get the full name in there now. And then Brian Searle from Insider Perks, who's a co-host, and Kara Brudegem. I think I got that right. Pretty close. Brudegem from the Canadian Council on Recreational Vehicles and Campgrounds. And I said that right. I believe.
The Canadian Campground.
Well, it was pretty close. It's up in Canada. So,
Yeah.
So I guess we just wanted to talk a little bit today just about what's been going on in Michigan. Last week, I think it really surprised me when I came in on Monday and all of a sudden, the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer had decided, campgrounds can reopen to recreational campers. And that really took me by surprise because I know my parents still live in Michigan and they were talking about how strict she had been on a lot of different areas. And I know I had spoken with campground owners who were getting frustrated. So I guess maybe we'll start with Darren. I guess were you as surprised as I was last Monday when she kind of opened the floodgates, I guess, for campgrounds?
I'm not sure I'd say surprised. I'd say it was long overdue.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of us on this call agree that camping is something that could have been done safely from the very beginning of the outbreak. So while we're obviously pleased that the governor gave the okay, if you will, to fully reopen and engage, it was something that was long overdue here in Michigan.
Yeah. I guess now she did put restrictions in place, correct? So it wasn't like you still have to. What types of restrictions were put into place, I guess, as far as when parks could reopen?
Mark, why don't I let you go ahead and answer some of those questions?
Yeah, so before you answer that, Mark, just give us a quick background here for the people who are watching. I know we don't have a lot of people on Zoom, but we have a lot of people who watch on Facebook Live now and later on. So just kind of tell them what you've done to help us get to this point first and kind of set the stage. I think that's probably, is that, Ben, would you agree? Just to give them
Yeah.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. And just to give a little background, which will help also provide a context, while my wife and I are the owners and managing partners of the Coloma-St. Joseph KOA in down here, St. Joseph, Michigan area. Prior to selling everything we own 4 years ago and being an entrepreneur, wanting to be in business for ourselves, I had a 24-year career in government affairs where I worked in the state Senate in several staff roles, and I was a professional advocate at both the state and federal level for 16 years. So, you know, I never imagined I would have to rely on my previous background quite as extensively as I have these last 2 months, or 3 months now. But it kicked in quite naturally to be able to navigate it. So, you know, what you normally have, you know, in the world of public policy is you have the legislature, which makes the laws through a committee process, and then it works its way through the House, it works its way through the Senate, goes to the governor, and then they give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the policy. The legislative branch was completely emasculated over the last 3 months, and the governor simply began issuing a number of executive orders. I think we're up to 116 here in the state of Michigan as of today. And there were 5 iterations of our stay home order that went into effect that had shared restrictions that were in place of what we could and could not do. Given my background, you know, I immediately, you know, I dive into the order itself. What is the letter of, in this case, the order, not so much the law, but what is the, you know, the letter of the order, and what are we allowed to do? My interpretation immediately from the get-go is that campgrounds were also essential services because we were providing short-term or long-term accommodations to those who were otherwise in need. As a parallel, hotels and motels were never closed in the state of Michigan. Their amenities such as their restaurants, their pools, which are all indoors, their meeting rooms, all of those were closed. And we as campgrounds could and did follow suit, where our pools were not allowed to open, our clubhouses were closed. You know, there was debate a little bit over restrooms, and I can get to that a little bit later. But hotels and motels never had to challenge why an individual was coming to their facilities. However, campgrounds were restricted. And what originally happened when the first stay home order went into effect here in Michigan is there was just an understanding that every business was closed. But then the federal government quickly produced a document that identified a number of key, quote unquote, essential services that they wanted to make sure were still open so that the infrastructure of the nation would still be moving forward. And within that, you know, the campgrounds themselves, even though there was an initial thought that they'd be closed, I reached out immediately through my contacts right to the governor's office and explained to her that there were, you know, there are 1 million Americans who live full-time in their recreational vehicle, traveling the country, including 3 of my work campers, one of whom was already on property. So if I were to close, where would they go? In the early days of the pandemic as well, my KOA counterparts across the southern half of the country let us know that the Canadians were making a mass exodus for the border before the border would close. And snowbirds were leaving, you know, upwards of, 4 to 6 weeks earlier than they otherwise would have. So as a good corporate citizen, I immediately opened up my pull-through sites just to be available for those weary travelers. And normally I don't open until the middle of April. This was the middle of March. I opened up as soon as the weather was accommodating. My water lines, I mean, I was fully functional, short of my store and all of the other, amenities and services, but my sites were available. And we probably had upwards of about 30 individuals who were traveling across the country, making their way home or back north, and stayed with us for as little as 1 night up to 9 nights within that window of time. Then come April 17, which was my official regular opening, I fully embraced the order from the federal government to make sure that I'm open with 4 essential services that I have, as well as most campgrounds have. I have a small grocery store at my campground. I have a cafe that serves takeout food at my campground. I have a laundry, and I sell end-use propane. So the four critical essential services that we offer, in addition to the short-term accommodations, put me in a situation where I never closed. That stood in contrast to comments that the governor would make in press conferences, which then just added to the confusion. And a number of campgrounds, I think, felt intimidated. Maybe we should close. They started asking their local health departments. Everybody, just to be safe, kind of defaulted to, yep, you should be closed. So then there was this patchwork of, I'm open to the fullest extent that I could be open, while others were completely closed, and it just created confusion across the state.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that you said, so hotels and motels were never shut down. I guess they were open the whole time. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of confusing to me, because it would seem like, if we're going to have hotels, motels open, we should at least be able to have campgrounds open too on.
Well, so here's the thing. I think this has uncovered a weakness throughout the whole country with, and Mark can talk about this, the lobbying efforts of the campground industry, which basically kind of didn't exist. At least not anywhere close to where the hotel lobby is.
The campground industry, well, I'll back up, and as a political scientist, tell you that most people go about their day peaceably. They live their lives, they do their work to provide for their families, either working for someone else or running their businesses. And typically most people, or not most, but a lot of people just kind of dismiss the government as an arena that they either are disgusted in or don't think really impacts their lives directly. I don't think anybody on the planet now believes that the government can affect their daily lives. The campground industry, I believe, is well represented, through, MARVAC here in Michigan, the Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds as well, with their respective state chapters, and then of course our national associations.
Well, again, I'm not trying to slight any of those organizations, just to put that out there. I'm just saying that when Ben was talking about hotels and motels never closing down, nationwide, you hear much more frequently in the minds of lodging and accommodations, they're talking about hotels and motels. In many cases, I don't even think people realize that campgrounds, as we've discussed before on this show and other places, are not trailer parks, not mobile home parks, and not just long-term places, right? And so I think there's more of an idea or a acknowledgement that we've had going through this situation that there maybe could be more extensive lobbying efforts to get campgrounds higher in the perception of people's minds than there was in the past.
I would agree, and I think the real Achilles heel that happened in all of this is, I would say, the majority of the decision makers, and here in the United States, I'll at least pick on the 50 individuals that call themselves governor. I guarantee you, the majority of them are not campers. They have never been in an RV. They have never been to a modern day campground. They also are running organizations that serve as our major competitor, that being in the state parks or federal parks, and their operations are significantly different than ours. So when there are challenges with, oh my gosh, what do we do about the shared bathrooms? They're thinking about outhouses in the federal, national forest. They're not thinking of my tiled showers and my marble floor. That we have. So there's definitely, there was education on the fly, and in many states, people, campground owners were trying to make friends within the legislative process or the governor. Well, the time to make friends is not when you're in crisis.
Before, not now.
That's
yeah.
Right. That's right. So that's where I had a little bit of an advantage based on a 24-year career. I was still able to pick up the phone and call people, all the way, to the governor's office, within the legislature, within the respective departments. And again, I felt perhaps because of my background and my ability to read the order, I opened to the fullest extent that the order allowed, even though it was extremely uncomfortable, because what ultimately happened, we had the governor making statements that campgrounds should be closed. We had our attorney general saying, if you see any business defying the governor, report them immediately. I'm a Boy Scout. I'm a rule follower. But any activity at my campground in the court of public opinion made it look like I was defying the governor, which I was not. And I was never shut down. So clearly I felt I was, the governor realized I was within our rights to do that. But and many other campgrounds followed suit as well, even though others ran into trouble. So I'll stop there and let other people chime in. Did that answer the question, Ben?
Yeah, Darren, you've been sitting there listening to all this. I guess what has Marvac been doing to kind of, I mean, I had heard that the communication between the governor and other associations wasn't very positive or very good. I guess what has Marvac been doing to kind of communicate with the governor's office, and what was the lobbying like to get to this point?
Well, as you can imagine, since day one of this officially coming down, when the communication came out that was interpreted as affecting the campground industry, Marvac, along with the ARVIC of Michigan, had been communicating with the governor's office, trying to clarify our position in how campgrounds could operate safely during this time. But as you can imagine, there were literally thousands of other industries wanting to carve out their own exemptions as well.
Right.
Not only, exactly. I mean, everything from restaurants to bars to hairdressers and salons. I mean, everyone wanted it, and they were, obviously inundating the governor's office with requests for clarification. So while I strongly think that, camping should have not been on a part of this from the beginning, I can see obviously where there were a lot of industries who were flooding the governor's office with requests. That being said, we continued on a daily basis, I would say, in sending out communication to different legislators along with the governor's office regarding the points that we felt strongly would allow camping to exist during this time. And I think, in echoing Mark's sentiment, there was a lot of, obviously, I think, poor communication. And as Mark also mentioned, the governor's take on what state parks were doing. And if you look, the DNR itself is not even choosing to open their camping until June 22nd. And there is a distinct difference between how the campgrounds in the state operate versus private campgrounds. And I understand if you literally look at the DNR's website, they are trying to provide explanations as to why is it that they're waiting until June 22nd. And they talk about the fact that they experienced layoffs, hiring freeze, the training that it takes to educate their employees on what is necessary, not only to just open, much less incorporate MIOSHA or the CDC guidelines to operate safely. So that put them, that put them obviously on a later part of the curve where private campgrounds were able to get ahead of this and were able to formulate safe guidelines and protocols that they were able to implement immediately to address these concerns, where we're being more proactive rather than reactive. So again, I think the governor was defaulting to a degree on the decision-making from the DNR and the state parks as to what they were doing, and unfortunately lumped us into that group, unfortunately.
So let's explore this hypothetically for a second, right? How do we, and Mark and Darren, this is a question for both of you guys, how do we do our best to make sure that this misinterpretation of what campgrounds are, what they can do, how safe they are, how self-contained, how different your marble bathrooms are than the outhouses, how do we do our best to build those relationships now, or start building them, so that if a situation like this ever comes up again, that the industry is better positioned in Michigan? Yeah.
As I had alluded earlier, the time to make friends is not when you're in a time of crisis. I mean, every business owner has an obligation to engage in their community, and it's helpful. I mean, I find it absolutely necessary to know who your leaders are. And that's everything from your local township supervisor to your trustees to your county commissioner and their officials, your state representative, your state senator, and your governor. What you'll find, after a 24-year career like I've had, the guy that you met who was the township supervisor 20 years ago has all of a sudden, risen to a position of, greater leadership, in their career. And now they're a state senator chairing a respective committee. Last week, I testified before the House and Senate Joint Select Committee on COVID-19 and shared exactly the experience that we had over the last several years. And the gentleman who's the state representative chairing that committee is somebody I've known for like 10 years. I haven't seen him in 4 since I left, that arena. But there he is sitting on the rostrum, and, good to see you, Mark. Nice to see you, Mr. Chairman. And, there was some familiarity. There wasn't a wink, wink, quid pro quo, but there was just some understanding of who I am as an individual and now as a business owner and credibility because of that relationship. So I would challenge every single one of us. If you don't know, let's focusing on the state level. If you don't know your state representative, you don't know your state senator, pick up the phone and give them a call. Introduce yourself, invite them to your property, show them around. They are very eager to know you, either they and or their staff, and to understand how you're serving, the constituents. Not only in that geographical area, but as I shared, my state senator, my state representative, I have a great relationship with them, and they understand that my location, my brand, while the majority of our guests come to us from a 100-mile radius, which largely is deemed local. But because of where I'm located in Southwest Michigan, 100 miles includes Chicago area. It includes, northern Indiana all the way down to Indianapolis. It includes Northwest Ohio. So immediately I become, an interstate destination in addition to serving Michigan residents. But yeah, building relationships is absolutely critical. And I put it into the context too of any other organization that you're a part of, or your family for that matter. You don't belong to a church and not know, the pastor or a couple elders or, or just other, fellow congregants that go to the church. You're not a part of a Kiwanis club or whatnot without, also knowing individuals within that community, a chamber of commerce organization, or your own family. You get together periodically, you pick up the phone, you call, how are you doing? How's life going on? Your relationship with your elected officials is no different. Because even though they have titles, even though they have lots of power, Governor Whitmer, I mean, with all of the things that she has accomplished in her career, she only knows that which she has personally experienced or has been educated on. So, but she has the power to make decisions on everything, as she did, and unfortunately impacted us somewhat negatively.
So if I'm a campground owner who's not Mark, what's my first step to do something on an easy basis? Obviously, you said pick up the phone, right? But when you gave your example of going to church. We go to church, for those of us who do, every single week over and over and over again. So you meet more people that way. So what is an easy way for a busy campground owner who's not a lobbyist and doesn't have the political skills like that to make those inroads in the beginning?
Well, Brian, I mean, I would say, to echo Mark's sentiment, obviously, whether you are a local campground with 25 sites or a large campground with several hundred, the first thing is obviously the communication. And every campground in the state of Michigan is licensed through the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And it is important that those campground owners have that discussion and that relationship with their local health inspector, with the department, and being able to demonstrate that they can open and operate in a fully functional and safe manner. If you look at currently, even the most recent executive order, which did allow campgrounds to open, there is a provision that the governor, unfortunately, in my opinion, still allowed local regulation to intercede in this behalf and enact more stringent guidelines that could impact the operations of a local campground. So it is absolutely critical that as a campground owner, you have those relationships with the local health department, who is your inspector, along with the department that licenses and regulates the campground industry. And absolutely, again, you don't have to be a lobbyist and have the direct line to the governor's office, but you should know who your local representative is. If they have, coffee hours in your district, you should go. You should be introducing yourself. You should be talking to them as a person who resides in that district. It is very much about the relationships. And then, yes, I would admit that it is important as a state association, whether that's MARVAC or ARVIC of Michigan, that you should be a part of those groups that represent you on the state level.
Okay.
Again, it is unity in numbers, and it is about, as an association, being able to demonstrate to the legislators, to the governor of the industry that we represent here in Michigan, not only from the standpoint of tourism and travel and the monies that come in that benefit the state, but again, how these associations represent these individual campgrounds, how they're providing jobs, tourism and travel, the economic impact. So, again, it is important for people to consider how your participation and your membership go a long way towards impacting how your industry thrives in the state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To dovetail off of what Darren had just said too. I mean, think of it as, we're interacting more with our neighbors. Even though we are regulated at the state level by Eagle, and that process can be intimidating. The state relies on the local health department. So, I mean, these literally are people who live right in the community with you. And in addition to, once we realized that at the state level, things were not working as they should have, I went to my health department, talked to them, explained, this is my interpretation. This is how I'm, operating my business safely for my staff as well as my guests. And they're like, yep, you're good. Unless there's blatant violations, we're not going to get involved in, the nuances and the debate over, is somebody here recreationally camping, or are they legitimately here for one of the 21 exceptions that the governor, had identified? That's what ended up truly allowing me not to run into some of the barriers that some of the other campground owners experience.
Darren, I guess when we talk to, I've had conversations with the National Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds, and I've asked them the same question Brian asked as to how we avoid some of this down the road. Is there a list we can get on to list RV parks or campgrounds as essential? Is there any way, Michigan, that MARVAC may be able to approach, the Michigan officials and get them on some sort of essential list to kind of avoid some of these issues down the road? Or do they even have a list?
I couldn't speak to whether they have a official or unofficial list, but I think you've heard this phrase over again, that obviously this is the first time anything like this has happened. Unless you were old enough to have lived through the Spanish flu, we've never encountered a situation like this. But clearly, in this particular pandemic, and the idea of being able to quarantine and self-isolate, yes, we think that camping has always been an opportunity to safely do this. Now, I think that we have strenuously made that point very clear to legislators and to the governor. As Mark mentioned during his testimony, I think many of the people that were sitting on that committee agreed with Mark. I'm sure they were even questioning why in the world it wasn't that way from the get-go. But I truly believe at this point, with the amount of communication, not only from campground owners, from the different associations, but I think even from consumers who have flooded their local legislators with phone calls through social media, I think the point was made that this was an opportunity to be able to safely go outside and enjoy the outdoors and follow, the guidelines that the governor has set forth regarding being outdoors, yet do it in a safe manner that would allow for people to still continue on with a semblance of their normal life. And again, not putting blame on any of these other industries, but RVing and camping were uniquely positioned from the beginning to allow for this to happen. I'm looking at an article that just got released on MSN, I believe it was yesterday, that says that RVing and camping, it's going to be a return to a trend that hasn't been seen in a while, simply because people are not going to choose to get on an airplane. They're not going to choose to go to a destination, perhaps like, a Disney World or Universal Studios, as quickly as they would like to enjoy going to a campground or a national park, where they're going to feel that there are more safety protocols in place that are going to allow them to enjoy recreation without putting their health potentially at danger.
I think that's the groundwork right now. Is seeing all those news articles is laying the groundwork for really changing that perception in the eyes of officials, and maybe lots of consumers who didn't consider camping before, who are perceiving it as safe. I think that's going to help. I'm sure it's going to help associations advocate for the safety of campgrounds on a broad level going forward, in a way we haven't been able to before.
I think to Mark's point, where he mentioned that a lot of legislators probably weren't very familiar with our industry because they were not campers or RVers. I think through all of our efforts, along with, as Karen just mentioned, the news articles and the social media presence, they're becoming aware of how camping could have provided an alternative throughout this entire situation. And I think, they are more astutely aware, and if nothing else, we're on their radar.
And so we need to keep that ball rolling forward, right?
Yeah.
So
That's
let's
right.
I'm curious about the outlook, right? So now we're open. Let's talk about something happy here, right? For a second, just switch topics. I'm curious how you, Mark, obviously owning a campground, reservations, that kind of thing, and Darren, what your take is on it. Before I do that, though, Kara, the border is still shut.
Yeah.
I don't know when it's going to open, but let's say, do you have any data on how many people would normally be crossing into Michigan to camp, for example, from Canada?
I don't have data specific to Michigan. No, I don't even have specific numbers about camping in the States on hand right now. We are kind of working to gather that information because there's lots of areas that it's impacting. I mean, I was just talking to a campground owner yesterday in Alberta who highly depends on that Alaska highway that, through the summer, they've got the majority of their guests are coming through, stopping with them on their way up to Alaska, and they're seriously concerned about how that's going to impact them. We are doing work to try to advocate for the international border to open as soon as possible, but it's looking like late July before that's going to happen, which obviously is a significant impact on how short our season is.
Yep.
That's more than halfway through the season for a lot of those, especially those northern parks on the way to Alaska. I don't have data now, but I hope to soon. We're doing lots of survey work with both campground owners and consumers now to try to gauge that and use that data in our arguments.
Do you have any sense of, let's just pretend for a second that the border was opening tomorrow, the willingness of Canadians to travel south?
So yeah, that's part of the survey requests is, are you interested in crossing the border? A lot of sentiment I'm hearing now is, no, I want to stay closer to home. I'm interested in, number one, supporting, my local economy and those kinds of things, but also, staying closer to my health region. There's obviously lots of concern about, we have healthcare and all those things here that, if you were to cross the border and then get sick,
Yeah.
how does that look? Getting any sort of travel insurance is going to be an interesting experience, I think, for the next several months. All of those things are going to be factors that I definitely think will reduce appetite to cross the border.
Mark, do you see a lot of business at your KOA from Canadians?
We actually, so in my business, we had, in 2019, I had 13,300 guests from all 50 states and 15 international countries. Of the international countries, it represented about 1,300 individuals, and more than half of them were Canadian. So they're either, coming down from Canada into the United States, touring in the Great Lakes area, or just making their way south. And, I'm a stopping point on their way, westward. Or they've come from the West and they're returning back to Canada and stop here before they head on to Port Huron, for example, to cross the border into Ontario. So Canadians make up about half of our international travel, and I've already had some that have had to unfortunately cancel because of the border closing. So we are too affected, even in the southern point.
So what is your outlook like overall then, Mark? I mean, obviously we know everybody took some kind of revenue hit from this. Now you're back open, but Michigan's season is shorter than some of the other states, right?
Yeah, and that was, the outlook is positive. I'll answer the question right up front. The outlook is very positive, but this is, given my background, I will be the first to tell you that I am not the best person turning a wrench or doing electrical work at my park, which, is amazing that I own one. So I've been blessed to receive, training and understanding from those who are smarter than I in this industry. Fast forward to the last 2 months, I felt obligated to lean on my background, not only to defend my park, but to help lead KOA as an organization. We have 19 locations here in the state of Michigan, as well as my service on the Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds of Michigan. And there's 1,100 licensed private campgrounds in the state of Michigan. I haven't found a soul who is in my position now as owning a campground who has my background. So the work that I felt called to do and the energy that I poured into it, to the detriment perhaps of some personal relationships with my wife and my kids, was because I felt a burden, not only for my business, but to help the other businesses in the state of Michigan to navigate these waters. At the end of the day, so fast forward to about a week before Memorial Day, it occurred to me that all Michigan residents were still under strict order to stay home unless it was necessary for us to leave for life-sustaining activity. At no time, though, in the 2 months of the stay-home order, did the grocery store, the hardware store, a restaurant serving takeout food, a coffee shop, anything, not one business that I ever went to stopped me and said, Mark, was it truly essential that you left your home today? Could you have just stayed home for your sandwich? Or we saw you here yesterday at the grocery store. Was it essential that you came a second day in a row? And then that business taking it upon themselves to deem that my answer was insufficient, refused to do business with me. That did not happen once. So that's where I decided, look, I'm getting out of the business of trying to decipher and validate my guests' reason for pulling into my park with a tent or an RV. We have another word for it. It's called discrimination. And usually that's against the law. So I just decided I'm not discriminating anymore. I'm going to treat my guests with the respect that they deserve as an adult, knowing the environment that they're in, either as a Michigan resident or someone who's traveling elsewhere in the country. And I'm going to provide them with my minimum basic operations with social distancing guidelines in effect. And what I'm finding, getting back to your question, Brian, is
but we're trying to be happy here, Mark.
We are trying to be happy. Back to your question, people have adopted new norms without being told to social distance. They social distance. without being told. We ask, for example, if guests come in a self-contained recreational vehicle, please consider using only your bathroom. It helps reduce the traffic on our public facilities, which helps with the cleanliness and maintenance of that and the spreading of any germ, not just COVID-19, but any germ. And then reserve the bathrooms for those guests who need it in a tent or a cabin that perhaps doesn't have a bathroom. At the end of the day, when we finally said we're out of the business of deciphering, I mean, you can feel the pressure. I mean, people want to be outdoors. As Darren had said earlier, I mean, not only are RVs now beginning to get gobbled up by people who are considering, camping and traveling for the very first time, but the reservations are now full throttle.
How Memorial Day, you weren't open to recreational campers over Memorial Day. I guess, how does that sting your budget looking towards the rest of the year? I have to imagine that stung quite a bit.
Yeah, no, Memorial Day, I was still under restriction, but it was amazing how many critical infrastructure workers and otherwise needy individuals decided to show up at my park that weekend. We were not full as we otherwise should have been. My business, again, because I never closed, I'm down about 1/3 of my business compared to last year at this time. Now, I'll take 70% of income as opposed to 0% of income for those campgrounds that were completely restricted. So I certainly have a hole to fill. I have 17 staff. We've slowly been ramping them up. They now are all on the schedule and working at least some level of hours. But I believe, this past weekend, we were, again, about 2/3 full. There's always a lull, in the weekdays, but the weekends are strong. And I anticipate they're going to continue to be strong all the way through the Labor Day weekend. To the larger point too, specifically for Michigan, most of the campgrounds in the state are seasonal, where we make 80% of our annual revenue between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So even though the restrictions were long in coming and long overdue, as Darren had indicated earlier, I am hopeful that the majority, if not all, of the campgrounds will still be able to do exceedingly well this summer and survive for next season.
Darren, I know your association also works with a lot of RV dealers as well as with campgrounds. I guess, what are you just hearing from the businesses you work with as far as how they're doing? I know we've been reading a lot about RV dealers are just doing incredible business right now.
Sure, absolutely. So when we look at the numbers from March, clearly RV sales are down. We don't have statistics right now from April or May, but obviously during this time it impacted because of the stay-at-home order, the sales of RVs. However, as you just mentioned, since that time, RV rentals have gone through the roof, not only from critical care workers who were looking for an opportunity to self-quarantine, but for those individuals who wanted to take an opportunity to get out and travel. RV, rentals it was very difficult to find a dealer that had any rentals available. Along with that, we have started to see the surge in RV sales, not only because other parts of the country were a little quicker to open than Michigan. So for those dealers that were offering online sales, they saw an uptick in that. And I definitely agree that now that we are being able to fully engage as an industry, it is our obviously hope that those campgrounds will be able to reemerge and regain any lost opportunity because of Memorial Day. And again, I think the thought process is there that camping versus air travel versus destination travel to a major attraction are going to be very appealing to people. I think that people want to get out and enjoy, obviously, summer in Michigan. We're very fortunate in the fact that we are a destination state as a peninsula state versus a pass-through state. Unless you took a sharp turn the wrong way, you meant to come to Michigan. So we're obviously blessed being surrounded by the Great Lakes. And with summer now fully here, I think those people who might have been considering a trip with air travel are going to be reconsidering that and looking at their options. And Michigan is an ideal place to go, even with health restrictions, if you will, and social distancing. Camping is and always has been a very safe method to do that. And I think more so now than ever, it's very appealing, not only from the cost standpoint, but from the safety standpoint. We're going to see, I believe, a very strong surge in camping for 2020. The RV dealers, absolutely. Did they miss out on some of the early spring sales that they might have otherwise enjoyed because of this? Yes, those numbers reflect that. But now that it is passed, I think people want to get out. They want to enjoy. They want to take advantage of what the RV lifestyle has to offer. And preliminary reports from our RV members are showing that people are buying. So we're very pleased to hear that. And obviously, hand in hand with that, go the traveling here in the state of Michigan.
So we had a comment on Facebook just wondering about your RV shows. I know you guys do RV shows. And I know here in the campground industry, we've lost a lot of conferences, and we're looking at maybe adjusting some conferences in the fall, associations are. So I guess what's that been like for you as far as putting on RV shows?
Well, we were actually in the middle of the Port Huron RV and Camper Show when the governor's official shutdown for indoor meetings took place. We were allowed to be open for 2 days, and then we had to shut down on Friday because of the governor's executive order. So obviously that was very unfortunate. Ironically enough, we still had consumers coming the next day wanting to come and see the show. So we had to cancel 2.5 shows, if you will. Our next show is slated for the first week in October. And again, as the governor continues to release restrictions on indoor gatherings, it is our hope to be hosting that show, which is our final show for 2020. But at the same time, we're going to be monitoring the governor's directives as it relates to indoor gatherings. Again, we're aware of the fact that some people may be hesitant to be inside with a mass gathering of people, but we are working with the venue in implementing, obviously, CDC and MyOSHA safety guidelines, along with the participants from the dealers and the campgrounds. So at this point in time, it is our intent to host that show, but obviously we'll be monitoring it closely, and we will make a decision as the show gets closer.
So it's an interesting dynamic, right, Darren? I just have this quick question. I know you're going to ask something, Ben, but governor, as we've discussed, and regardless of, and again, I'm not from Michigan, so I'm not involved in all her decision making, but regardless of which side you fall, whether she's done a good job or done a bad job or whatever, she's only one person, and only, as Mark was saying earlier, only knows what she's had the sum of her experiences be, right, throughout her political career. So at what point do you make a decision solely based on what Governor Whitmer says, like you were talking about, Darren, like what tomorrow she can come out, she's not going to, but she comes out and says, all conventions are fine, everything's great, we think you'll be safe. Is that the only opinion then you base your decision to proceed with the show on, or are there other things that come into play when you as an organization are making that decision? I'm just curious.
Obviously, the critical part would be whether or not a event of our size, which is the largest indoor RV show that we host in Michigan at this facility. So obviously, first and foremost, we would want clear guidance from the governor's office that something like this could even be held legally. From that point, obviously, it would be incumbent upon us and the facility to address what guidelines, not only offered by the CDC, but Michigan's OSHA, in being able to safely allow an event like this to happen. First and foremost is the safety and the well-being of the consumers who would attend that show, and obviously the show participants. So again, We're not sure what that show might be like, but based on the feedback we've been receiving from consumers and from our members, they want us to proceed with that show. Again, it would be very important for us to convey the safety protocols that are going to be in place, whether that's having to cap X amount of consumers through the show at any one time, and looking at maybe how we space out the displays and the exhibitors. Those are all things that we're going to be carefully monitoring, which we're already looking at how that floor plan might look if we have to incorporate some social distancing guidelines. But we're very optimistic in the fact that so far our members have indicated that they would want us to move forward with hosting that show. But again, it all comes down to the directives from the governor's office and obviously the safety of the people who would be attending and participating in that show.
Yeah. I guess, Mark, so June 1st was a really great day because she opened up recreational camping. And then today's another really great day because for your campers, you can open up the pool. I know we've been getting I've been hearing tons of comments from campground owners who are nervous about opening up their pools, even when they were given the go-ahead, just because there's a lot to a pool and, social distancing and not wanting to make campers angry because they are only allowed so many in the pool area, things like that. I guess, how are you handling that at your pool as you're opening today? Are you expecting a lot of eager campers wanting to jump in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll start kind of dovetailing too on what Darren was saying in the previous question. I mean, we're a consumer-driven organization, and in addition to wanting to take responsible steps to keep our staff and our guests safe and have those procedures and measures in place, we're doing so to meet guest expectations as well. And there are some guests who will continue to, for example, wear a mask both outside as well as indoors. But there will be guests who will be eager to be in the pool. Where the rub kind of went on things like the pool. I mean, as a private business owner, my pool is a key piece of critical infrastructure, and I was unwilling to leave it covered and let algae continue to grow. So I literally started preparing my pool as I normally would, even though I knew it wasn't going to likely be able to be opened on Memorial Day weekend like it normally is. But I had it ready and it was fully operational. The chemicals were in balance. The CDC guidelines specifically said there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that COVID-19 can be spread in a pool, a hot tub, or a water park. So the science was showing that the pool itself was safe. The only challenge then was, well, how about, then people in the pool? The first step of anybody's health and wellness is the personal response, the personal choices we make. If someone's uncomfortable being on a pool deck, don't go on the pool deck. If you're uncomfortable, going to an RV show, don't go to the RV show. But if you want to go, there are things that you could do, whether it be the mask or, the social distancing. And as I shared earlier, people have adopted new norms. I fully anticipate that on the deck, we are limited to 50% capacity. So my pool, for example, is licensed for 106 individuals. We're going to limit that to 50%. So 53 people can be on the deck so long as everybody is maintaining social distancing. And if I, as a business owner, discover that 53 is too many and they can't, then I'm going to look independently raise that number. I don't need the governor to tell me. I mean, I can gauge that. And, as private entrepreneurs, again, in the business of meeting guest needs and expectation, we too want to do the right thing. And I believe we have the creativity and the ability to make those decisions independently, as opposed to just waiting for, government to mandate specific things.
I can agree with the fact that some of the social distancing stuff has become a norm for some people, but at the same time, I also go to Walmart. I can see that there's a majority, there not a majority, but there's quite a few people where obviously staying 6 feet apart's not a huge deal. They're not wearing masks, which is fine. I don't really wear a mask a lot. But, you know, I guess, what are you going to do for those people? So, yeah, you know, the majority of your campers may be okay on the pool. You know, 53 people, they may stay apart from each other. How are you going to enforce it when people aren't following those guidelines?
Well, we'll thin the herd on the deck, of course, if we have to. I honestly I doubt I'm going to have to, but because people really are, like you said, if you go to the store and people are within 6 feet of you, we all have kind of this immediate, you know, whoa, hey, the zone, you know, please stand back, you know, or you personally remove yourself from that situation. But if they do, then, you know, we can have staff that literally will, you know, bring people off the deck, rotate people in, you know, like you do at the store when it's really busy and they're counting it. I hope I don't have to get to that point. We have also implemented or intend to implement adult only hours. You know, so that, you know, all the kids, you know, you're out and the only people that could be in the pool are those over 18. So kind of the parallel would be like the early shopping hours grocery stores adopted for those who are at risk. Then you don't have, you know, the splishy splashy or the crowd to the pool, but, you know, adults can just enjoy it. And I can do that voluntarily. We weren't mandated to do that, but you know, one of my staff.
Isn't it better to have chlorine splashed around though with a virus? I mean, I'm just curious.
I would agree. It is a disinfectant. You know, so the science and the data shows that the pool can be maintained safely, and with people's independent choices and those kind of enforcement, you know, protocols that we put into place. And by the way, my pool's outside, so we don't have the same, you know, risks that would be inherently involved with an indoor pool at a hotel, for example.
Along the same vein of thought, I guess, you know, there's people who aren't being responsible with the social distancing. There's also business owners, and I know I've read about some campground owners that maybe aren't being as responsible as they should be either. How does, you know, and maybe Darren can jump in too, how does that impact your ability to lobby for this industry when you do have campground owners that maybe aren't following the guidelines or doing things that, you know, are hurting, that get picked up by the local media, I guess?
Well, there's always going to be bad actors in every industry, and, you know, the law as it has always existed has given the local health departments ultimately that authority. It always has. And, you know, where I was frustrated with this process is, you know, the rules were being created, or I should say the restrictions were being put in place almost for the lowest common denominator, instead of recognizing that there are those of us who are providing high quality, high service, taking everything, you know, as serious and responsible as we ought to. The local health department, for those bad actors, can simply shut them down. I have 5 licenses with the state of Michigan. I've got one for my pool, one for my hot tub, one for the campground itself, one for my drinking water, and one for my cafe. You know, so there are 5 levers that can be used against me if I'm not doing things right, and that those same levers can be used against those who aren't, and quite frankly should. And hopefully those customers will then come to my park.
You know, to echo Mark's comments, again, as campground owners, I think by and large, every one of them wants to do the right thing. They want to have their consumers be healthy and safety and enjoying the amenities of their community. Now, to this moment, there are RV parks and campgrounds that are choosing not to open some of their amenities. And that is a choice that they are making and what they feel is best for their consumers, and that's their decision. Mark obviously felt strongly that they could open their pools. I know some campgrounds are making the decision at this time not to open pools, not to offer rentals like kayaks and canoes. And that is a business decision, but I'm sure that they are doing that based on what they feel that they can also manage, but
Sure.
What's in the best interest of their people. And I think strongly that, you know, those people are going to respect that decision. Yes, maybe, you know, your children are disappointed that you may not be able to rent a paddle boat, but at the time, I think that people are going to respect that decision. And again, those people that attend these campgrounds and RV parks are just happy to be out and enjoying that. And the fact that you might not be able to use the laundromat, I think is going to be a very small part of that. And again, as we continue down this road and you see the curve flatten, the big euphemism that we keep using, and I think people hopefully will become more comfortable. And at the same time, we obviously all want to see this pandemic lessen. There is no cure right now. There is nothing that is going to prevent this from going away entirely at this point in time. But I think if we all do our part and be respectful and mindful and take our own safety precautions into place, there's more than ample opportunity to be safe and enjoy the camping experience. Yes, there will be those people who are not going to adhere to smart decision making. And it's, obviously our hope that they would change their mind. There is no campground owner that wants to be on the 11 o'clock news for having been discovered the source of an outbreak. So it behooves them to keep in mind the guidelines that are out there and the safety protocols that they can implement. No one wants to have, their campground be the source of an outbreak and then have their local health department come in and potentially shut them down, or they lose their license. And then it's no longer a case of, hey, I just lost Memorial Day. Now I've lost the entire summer. Those are completely different things. So, we want to believe that people are being mindful and keeping the best interest of their customers, who are their livelihood, at the forefront of their mind.
So you talked briefly about amenities, and so I just want to circle back because Ben had that question originally at the beginning of the show. Are there restrictions on amenities now with Michigan or no?
The only
Go ahead, Mark. Nope.
Yeah, the only restrictions we have on the amenities now would be our indoor spaces. So my clubhouse, for example, is closed. It could be open for a group of no more than 10, but it's not an area that we have active staff in. So I've just decided to keep it closed. Other than that, according to CDC guidelines, the playground equipment with regular maintenance is deemed, as not a public health risk. My jumping pillow is open, and people naturally, again, even the kids, some parents will either tell their kids don't go on it at all, or they take turns. And in a worst case scenario, if I found that I had too many people on it and it was getting crowded, I would take the responsibility of getting everybody off and running it like a carnival ride. You let a few people on, they jump on it for a few minutes, I blow a whistle, you get off, you can get back on line just like a roller coaster and keep riding, while everybody takes turns. So far that hasn't been necessary, but as the summer ramps up, if the public health threat still really is there, it's an easy way to fix it. These challenges are not insurmountable, and I think that's where I got really frustrated.
We share the knowledge with each other, right? Otherwise, nobody knows how to do it properly.
That's right.
What about food service, Mark? In your cafe, what about food service? How is that impacted?
My cafe is actually up with its sales because people, they don't want to cook themselves. It's convenient. It's right there. My cafe is typically, it can be run by one staff person. So we're not so concerned with the social distancing of the staff and normal protocol. We're washing our hands. We're always wearing, the food service gloves. We're preparing people's foods, behind the counter, and then we deliver it right to their site with no contact delivery. So, again, just soap and water, techniques that have been adopted by a number of other industries as well.
So two-part question for you, Mark, just talking about amenities. Have you changed anything as it relates to, we were just talking about your cafe and your playground and all those kinds of things as far as cleaning procedures or disinfectants or people out on the jump pad or the playground at the same time is the first part. And then the second part is do you think that in the future, if we don't have a dramatic decline in cases, that there's a way that people can differentiate themselves as a business by exceeding CDC guidelines as a marketing tactic?
Yeah, I mean, we have always had high standards. I mean, even pre-COVID, with respect to the restrooms, pre-COVID, the number one thing every camper looks for in the annual North American Camping Report are the bathrooms clean. So we maintain them exceedingly well, and I'm very proud of my staff who are diligent in that task. So it's not only the number, the deep cleanings that we do, but then the additional cycles that we put into place, wiping down, disinfecting the cycles with some additional cycles as well. So far so good. Are we perfect? No, but are we doing everything we reasonably can to make sure that the restrooms are as safe as possible? Absolutely. And I think our guests appreciate and visually will see those efforts as well. And the same applies even for the amenities. So what I've integrated into our operation, I have signage everywhere, literally everywhere, reminding people to maintain social distancing. I have the CDC guidelines themselves posted at all of our amenities so that they know this says it's safe. The pool, for example, today, CDC guidelines are right there. COVID cannot be spread. My hope is, and in a camping environment, the science and data overwhelmingly shows that being outdoors is healthy for us, both physically and mentally. And even though we want to put responsible measures in place, I am hoping that people forget that, the public health threat, even exists. Not that we're pretending that it doesn't exist, but just to give them some sense of normalcy and peace about being here when on property. But for those who will need or want a little more hand-holding, I will, probably maintain. We've got a sign, when you come in and where the RV stops, we have a sign that says curbside check-in available upon request. And all I have to do, they simply call us and a staff member comes out, mask and all, with the iPad, and we check them in. They don't even have to come into the store to register. And that will probably be something we'll continue to offer many of our guests.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess, so everything's looking pretty good for the rest of the summer as far as Michigan's concerned. I get, you're looking like businesses, campgrounds throughout the state are going to be doing pretty well, hopefully, as long as the weather's nice.
Well, tourism is the third largest industry in the state of Michigan, followed by agriculture and manufacturing, of course. And this past weekend was a brilliant example of why we live here. I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. 72 degrees. It's kind of, beautiful in the sun, maybe even a little uncomfortable, but a little too cool in the shade. So you went back and forth. Yeah, we are excited. We're excited to get back to more of a normal routine and just meeting our guests' need instead of waking up every day wondering how the rules have impacted us one way or the other. And hopefully we can move beyond this, demonstrating responsible leadership industry and helping our guests just enjoy being outdoors.
Mark, do you feel like there's enough of a awareness within the governor's office, specifically short term, that if, let's say, worst case scenario, virus cases can start to go up within the space of a couple weeks or within the month, that she will allow campgrounds to continue to be open regardless?
I can't predict what this.
I know. I'm just asking you what your gut feeling is. That's because you're
Yeah. I won't go down the political road. My gut feeling. I sure hope that there's an understanding. I think the challenge to all of us, not only as business owners but as citizens, at time to time we need to remind our elected officials that they work for us. It is not the other way around. Our elected officials do need to understand that, we are adults, we have intelligence, and we may disagree, but we're disagreeing at times for sound reasons and logic that they do need to hear and listen to. And I believe the governor, whether she has, admitted it or not, has come to understand, a little bit more about our industry than what she understood 2.5 months ago. The temptation for all of us, myself included, is, the people are pounding down the doors. They're going to start pulling into my campground, and I'm going to get back into a normal routine of just focusing on meeting their needs. You know, my hope is that that's not to my detriment, while those who don't understand our industry begin to put other things in place and we're back at it again. But, you know, I hope there can be a genuine, you know, an opportunity for both of us to have learned that we need to be engaged as business owners, as citizens, you know, of the state, and our lawmakers need to also understand that we can and have taken responsible steps and procedures to put in place.
That was a very political answer, but I'm going to let you get away with it this time.
My coworker was asking if if you guys would have these issues if Governor Whitmer was an RVer and not a boater. So,
yeah.
Early on in a press conference that the governor did, she alluded to the fact that she either was or currently is a camper. So to what degree of camping, whether that's rustic or RVing, I don't know. Clearly, we understand that they own a boat. Unfortunately, that made some news. But again, I think that all the information that has been circulated from different groups, MARVAC, ARVIC of Michigan, along with local legislators have definitely provided more awareness and education to the governor's office. And now that we're back in business, if you will, and people are traveling, people are going to campgrounds, I think local health officials recognize the fact that private campgrounds are doing everything they can, if not exceeding expectations, to provide a safe atmosphere for the consumers. Along with that, you can't miss it. In any major highway in Michigan, you're seeing campers going down these highways, going to campgrounds. And again, I think local health officials, local legislators in their respective regions recognize the fact that private campgrounds provide a safe and great opportunity for people within the state and from out of state to travel into Michigan and not have to worry about any overlying health concerns.
Is there a benefit now to doing any kind of a PR campaign that shows how campgrounds are deploying things safely? Like kind of a featured story on like, you know, this campground's doing this safely, and you're so just in case anything were to come up where you have more of an awareness? I mean, I don't know. You tell me from a legislative standpoint.
I know New Jersey did something like that. They released an ad that kind of highlighted the fact that, you know, it's a great campgrounds are a great place to social distance. You know, campground owners are doing extra things, stuff like that. So
right. I mean, like PR targeted toward the media, the local public, the legislators, the governor, like basically press releases, but just that highlight stories of how owners are going above and beyond or doing things differently or cleaning more frequently or whatever, so that then it's in the back of someone's mind if they ever have to make a decision like this again, that, oh, I saw this again and again and again, that campgrounds are safer.
Yeah, I would say, you know, an effort like that, certainly when it hurt, you know, we have here in the state of Michigan, we've been blessed with a very effective marketing campaign. You may have heard of it, called Pure Michigan. Perhaps Pure can reference some standards of cleanliness now, in addition to, you know, warm heart feelings that we receive when we come here and enjoy the outdoors. As always, though, Brian, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this point, you know, ultimately it's going to be consumer voices that are going to highlight, you know, what you know, the good actors and what individuals are doing. I mean, my ratings, I mean, I live and die by my NPS score on my website. You know, I monitor my Google, you know, my Facebook, you know, and TripAdvisor reviews and comments, and take each one of them quite seriously. So, you know, I think, you know, every campground, you know, is subject essentially to that same level of attention, you know, where guests themselves are going to say, you know, this park's knocking it out, you know, or, you know, this one's knocking it out of the park and doing things right, making me feel safe. I enjoyed my time, versus, you know, really scary and sketchy. But as Darren said, I mean, I don't know a single campground owner that has been associated with with the Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds, or even MARVAC, that isn't, laser beam focused on doing absolutely everything we can to take responsible steps to the letter and the spirit of the law.
Well, I think I agree with you, but I'm going to press you a little bit on this one because that was another political answer. It was, to be fair, right? Like, you didn't actually answer the question. So I get it. You're right about reviews, 100%. Consumers are going to give their opinions there, but the people who are making these decisions at a higher level are not reading your reviews for the most part. So you sit on the board of the Michigan Arvit, right? So is there a benefit for that association to do any kind of limited PR? Yes or no, that helps the industry?
I would say yes, and but there's only so much bandwidth, only so much time. Time and money is always the most limiting factor.
Sure.
But yes.
All right, what else you got, Ben? We're running out of time here.
Yeah, I mean, let's see if Sandra Anson, she runs Poly Products, which is based in Michigan. Let's see if she wants to talk a little bit. Just give us a quick, Sandra, if you can, if you're willing to just give us a quick update on how your business has been going. I know you do a lot of, you deliver a lot of like picnic tables, different products to campgrounds.
Yep, can you hear me?
We can't really hear you very well.
Is better?
It's getting better. Oh.
I'm right on top of the microphone. They're brand new.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We can't hear you very well, Sandra.
Okay, I apologize.
That's all right. That's okay. Well, I guess I don't. I mean, do you have anything else, Brian, on your end?
Well, I can always come up with questions to ask.
I know.
That doesn't mean they're interesting or people care what the answers are. So, but no, I think we have a really good grasp of what happened in Michigan. Mark walked us through the legislation. It sounds like that the industry, both at a state and perhaps even somewhat at a national level, was lucky to have someone like Mark who was willing to step up with his experience, and that's what we really need in those times. Leaders who are willing to use their skills and do those kinds of things. And obviously, Darren helped out too. I'm sorry I can't say more about you, Darren. We've never met before, so I'm sure you're a fantastic guy who've done thousands of things that I have no idea that you've done. So perhaps we can connect more after this call, and I can get more familiar with you. But yeah, I think we've walked through it, and I think that the outlook for Michigan campgrounds appears to be really good. We need to get the border open with Canada, or start some kind of smuggling operation. How does that work?
You can smuggle Canadians across the border.
Yeah, responsible operations conversations here. Yeah, I don't know if I want to go there, but I'll tell any Canadians who are interested to contact you. How about that?
That works. Political answer. I like it.
I know at some point we do need to dive into, Kara, at some point in another show, we need to dive into this. I know the southern states are a little bit nervous. The Canadian snowbirds may not be coming down. And so we definitely need to dive into that at some point as to what impact that could have on Florida, Texas, Arizona, stuff like that. So, yeah,
like I said earlier, I think it's really going to hugely depend on things like the insurance industry, and obviously, timing for the border opening and those kinds of things. But and always there will be those willing to bear the risk to maintain their lifestyle, and some who maybe won't, and it'll be interesting. This year will be interesting to see how the winter looks.
Well, not only that, Ben, but we also need to talk to Kara about, when you get that data, Kara, that we were talking about earlier, I think that's a really good thing we could dive into too.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to discuss it. We are, like I said, still kind of in the works of producing the survey stuff. It's early yet, but I am happy to share that information.
That's great. Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Darren, for coming on the show, and just thanks for giving us a little viewpoint about what you guys have been going through. And it looks like everything's going really well. Going well, better now, and hopefully it continues to get better. And for the campgrounds in Michigan. And thanks everyone for watching us this week. And
before we go, Mark, can you send Ben a collared yellow shirt so he has something different to wear next week?
Does he need a yellow shirt?
Yes.
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to even give him a nice name tag.
All right, good. We're gonna expect that next week.
Okay. All right.
All right. Yes. Thank you all for joining us. Ben, wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks for all for joining us. Next week, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the RV industry. So focused on why everything's been going so good for the RV industry. Is it sustainable? I know we've been getting a lot of questions about, is it sustainable for the manufacturers to keep manufacturing the way they are and rentals? And so we're going to take a look at that. So make sure to join us next week. And thanks everyone for joining us this week. Have a great rest of the week.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Come to Michigan.
Come